Hello out there, golf fans. Welcome to another Monday wrap-up of the PGA Tour, the LPGA Tour, the Senior Tour, and the Live Tour. You're joined by your host, Brian Rascona. Lots of things to get to over the golf landscape over this past weekend. Matthew Fitzpatrick, yet again, back-to-back wins for him on tour as he wins the Zurich Classic with his brother, Alex Fitzpatrick, in a dramatic fashion down in New Orleans as they took it by a course record, minus 31, a championship record. Him and his brother, we'll get to that in just a moment. Also, Nelly Korda thrusts herself back up into the number one slot in the LPGA. She takes another major, her 33rd win of her career. She ties Dottie Pepper all time among the most wins on the LPGA. And also, Retief Goosen, in a points format, defeats the Canadian Stephen Ames 39-37. Also, Stuart Sink finished in the top five after taking the PGA Championship. But a couple things that happened off the course this week I'd like to get to. As far as the PGA, Brian Rolap, who is the CEO of the PGA Tour, decided to stop the opening weekends in Hawaii for 2027. So part of it had to do with the wildfires they had last year. They had to cancel the Sony Open. So now they're canceling the Century Championship and the Sony Open. They're stopping the Hawaiian circuit to start the year in January, which kind of kicks off the PGA Tour year. That's done, and he claims that he's going to start the PGA Tour season on the West Coast over in California. We have yet to hear what dates, what tournaments they're going to be, who the sponsors are. But this is the first time since 1965 that Hawaii will not host the opening tournaments for the PGA coming in 2027. So that's a little bit of news that came down last week that you didn't hear from me from. Also, later on in the week, Jimmy Furyk was named the 2027 Ryder Cup captain for the U.S. team as they go out to Ireland to play in another Ryder Cup event, and that will take place in 2027. Jimmy Furyk was also a Ryder Cup captain in 2018. He'll be back again. I personally like the move. One-time major champion, won the U.S. Open back in 2003 over at Olympia Fields in Chicago. I was actually at that tournament. I like the veteran move. He's a senior, obviously. He's got the cachet. Their players respect him. I think it was a little transition from Keegan Bradley from this year. I think Keegan Bradley was a little bit over his head, being the Ryder Cup team captain, trying to overthink the golf course at Bethpage, cut the rough down, made a lot of those holes a little shorter, didn't really play to their advantage. Now you have Jimmy Furyk, but Jimmy Furyk was his assistant at the Ryder Cup in Bethpage. So we'll see what happens. But I like the choice of Jimmy Furyk, and if you hear all the players on the PGA Tour, they like the pick as well for Jimmy Furyk. So he's your Ryder Cup team captain. That's the wrap-up as far as what off the course goes. Ryder Cup team captain Jimmy Furyk, and no Hawaii tournaments to start 2027. Now, let's start with the Senior PGA Tour as they had the Mitsubishi Electric Classic, and it was a points format as I discussed earlier last week. Bogey gets a certain amount of points or minus a point. Double bogey or more gets minus a certain amount of points. A par was no points. A birdie was plus points. And an albatross was plus points. And winning that tournament, hats off to Retief Goosen, also U.S. Open champion 2004, Shinnecock. I was also at that event. Retief Goosen wins what was called the Mitsubishi Electric Classic, and he took on Stephen Ames. He won that by 2 points, so hats off to Retief Goosen. Nelly Korda gets another major down at the Chevron in Houston, jumps in the pond afterwards with her family and her caddy, and really won wire to wire. There was nobody near her. First time that championship has been won by 5 strokes or more in more than 18 years. And again, as I mentioned earlier, she joins Dottie Pepper, 33rd overall for most LPGA wins on tour. Now, to the Zurich Classic. Dramatic shot on 18. That's twice in a row, 2 weeks in a row now. Matthew Fitzpatrick has had dramatic shots on the 18th hole. 18th hole down at TPC New Orleans is a par 5. Now, this was an alternate shot format, the way I explained to you last week. Alternate shot format. It was Matthew Fitzpatrick. Alex hits one into the bunker on his second shot on the par 5. And then coming out of the bunker was Matthew Fitzpatrick, puts it within a foot of the hole. And Alex Fitzpatrick, holding his head in disbelief, had basically a gimme putt from 1 foot to earn his PGA Tour card. That was the ramifications that came out of the win for the Fitzpatrick brothers, as their whole family watched on. Mother and father watched on as well, as 2 brothers win a PGA Tour event. Minus 31, another course record at the Zurich Classic. Actually, course record on Saturday, they shot a 57 together, and then a championship record of a minus 31. Alex Fitzpatrick wins the tournament with his brother, and he gets his PGA Tour card for the next 2 years. He gets an exemption for 2 years. Also, an exemption to the PGA, the Players' Championship next season. 2-year exemption as well for him. So hats off to the Fitzpatrick brothers. And, you know, my pick of the week was Tom Hoagie and Billy Horschel, and they were only, coming into Sunday, they were only about 3 strokes off the lead, but they couldn't get them over the top of the family dynamic between Matthew Fitzpatrick and Alex Fitzpatrick. So that's been the wrap-up for this weekend. This weekend, coming up, we look forward to the Cadillac Championship down at Doral, another tournament I've been to. Beautiful golf course down at Trump National, Doral. Last year's winner, not sure who that was, but I'll double-check that for you on Wednesday, and I'll have my picks as well, so stay tuned for that. This has been the wrap-up with Brian Rascona after the PGA Zurich Classic, after the LPGA Championship, the Chevron taken by Nelly Korda, and the PGA Championship. Also, one other note that just came in. Live Golf. Live Golf now has postponed their event in June, a week after the U.S. Open, down in Louisiana, citing lack of funds. Their next championship is slated for May 7th down in Virginia. That will still take place as far as we know. We'll wait to hear news on that. But literally 2 hours ago, it just came out that Live Golf will not be having or postponing the championship down in Louisiana the week after the U.S. Open, which will take place Father's Day weekend, as it always does at Shinnecock Hills. So that's a wrap-up for this week with Brian Rascona. You can hit me up on Twitter, B_RASCONA. And we'll see you on Wednesday. I'm going to have picks for you, and we'll go over the weekend, which should be a fun one. The Cadillac Championship is always a good one, and we'll take a look at that on Wednesday. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy your week. Hit 'em straight.